Hello, Psych 101 students, and welcome to Module 3. In this module, we will be covering Chapter 4, Development Across the Lifespan, and Chapter 9, Motivation and Emotion. Let's get started on Chapter 4. In this chapter, come on, in this chapter, we will cover the following big questions. In this first learning objective, we'll look at how does development happen in the womb. And then in learning objectives 2, 3, and 4, we will cover how do infants and children develop. Learning objective 5 deals with adolescent development. And learning objective 6 will be how do adults develop. Let's begin with learning objective 1. How does development happen in the womb? So there are Well, actually, sorry, before I get to that sentence, let's look at the definition of developmental psychology. It's the scientific study of how humans change over the lifespan from conception until death. So it is the full range. We never stop developing. Once the first cell is formed after the sperm meets the egg, all the way until we die, there is development going on within the human. Uh, the changes can be grouped into 3 domains: physical, social, emotional, and cognitive. Let's see what we study in each area. And here's a nice little picture. You can see the 3 domains of study. We have the physical domain, growth of the body and changes in the brain, sensory and motor skills, and level of hormones. So we'll look at things like brain development, motor skills, sensory development, reflexes, puberty. In the cognitive area or domain, we look at how our mental processes and abilities to think and communicate change over time. We will be looking at topics like theory of mind, language, moral reasoning, memory, and dementia in old age. In the socio-emotional area, as it says, we look at changes in how we understand ourselves, interact with others, and experience and regulate emotions. We will be looking at topics like attachment, identity, parental styles, peer relationships, marriage, and others. So these 3 domains, they interact with each other, which is why they're overlapping them. And it's always the fact that when there's changes in one of the domains, it's going to affect the other 2. I'll just give you a quick example. As the brain physically matures, in the physical domain, it's going to affect how we think about others, and it's also going to affect our communication skills, which are both in the cognitive domain. And as we think differently about others, and as our communication improves, it's going to affect our relationships with others, which is in the social emotional domain. And this is always the case that changes in one area will, have some sort of effect in the other 2 areas. Let's look at how humans develop prenatally. And so we'll be looking at the prenatal period, and the word prenatal just means prior to birth. There are 3 areas, or actually 3 periods, I should say, of development. The first period is the germinal period, and it lasts for the first 2 weeks. It's a period in prenatal development that starts at conception, and it goes until 2 weeks after conception. So in this germinal period, the first cell of life, known as a zygote, forms when a sperm cell fertilizes an egg. And the zygote will then divide over and over again from one cell, the original zygote cell, to become 2 cells, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16. It makes exact duplicates of itself over and over again. So it ends up forming, during this first 2 weeks, it forms a cluster of identical cells that then implant themselves into the uterine wall, so the wall of the uterus. And this happens by the end of 2 weeks after conception. So a lot in the first 2 weeks. The first cell, the zygote, is formed. This happens within a fallopian tube. The cell then starts to divide from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, etc. And it becomes a cluster of cells, and it travels into the uterus, and it ends up sticking and planting to the uterine wall. Okay, that's the germinal period. The embryonic period is the second major period. As it says here, it lasts from 3 to 8 weeks after conception. So it starts at the beginning of the 3rd week until the end of the 8th week. So it's a total of 6 weeks. And during this period, the brain, spine, major organs, and bodily structures all begin to form in the embryo. Okay. And then we have the third and longest period is the fetal period. This lasts all the way from 9 weeks after conception until birth. As it says here, when the brain continues developing, bodily structures are refined, the fetus grows in length and weight, and accumulates fat in preparation for birth. This has been nicknamed the finishing and fattening stage, because all of those bodily structures and the brain and the spine and the major organs that all started developing in the embryonic period, they finish during the fetal period. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, it's mainly about the fetus getting big enough, and which is the fattening part. It needs to grow in length and weight in order to be able to survive once it leaves the womb. Okay, here's a few pictures showing you the 3 different periods. So once again, in the germinal period, shown on the left here, you can see that there are a number of sperm around trying to form a union with this egg, which is so much larger than the little sperm. When one sperm penetrates the egg or the ovum, and this is what is known, of course, as conception or fertilization. Remember, it will become a cluster of cells and implant by the end of 2 weeks. In the embryonic period, shown in the second picture, remember, it goes from the start of week 3 until the end of week 8, and the organs and major systems of the body are forming. And or at least they all begin to form during this period. Basically, every system of the human body, all the organs in the brain and spinal cord, and you'll have like your eyes and your ears will begin to form, and so in your limbs and fingers and toes will all begin to form during this stage. And then finally the third longest stage, the fetal period, from week 9 until birth. It's a time of tremendous physical growth, and brain development is also very amazing and tremendous during this period as the baby tries to get ready to survive outside the womb. A little bit more about brain development between day 18 after conception and the 6th month after conception. So between day 18 and the 6th month, neurons, that we've talked about before, these are nervous system cells, including and especially like the brain cells, they grow at an incredible rate. It's during this period, which is, it's a long period from about day 18, about 3 weeks after conception, all the way up to the 6th month. The fetus can produce up to 250,000 new neurons per minute at times. It gets up to about 250,000 per minute. and which is just incredible. A quarter of a million new neurons are forming each minute, or at least at the maximum rate. And this is why we're going to end up having 8 billion neurons in the brain. This process of rapid neuron growth is known as proliferation. Okay? Proliferation just means the rapid production of new neurons. Problems can occur in each period of prenatal development. So this picture is showing you the three periods are listed along the top there. The germinal period, the first 2 weeks, the embryonic period from 3 to 8, and then the longer fetal period. If let me talk about the types of problems that may occur in each period. During the germinal period, if there are problems during the germinal period, it usually results in a miscarriage. So, and when there is a problem in those first 2 weeks in the germinal period, and there is a miscarriage, in the majority of cases, the woman would not even realize that that conception or fertilization had taken place. It's really too early. So sometimes, for instance, that cluster of cells just fails to implant into the uterine wall, and it ends up being discharged, during the menstruation period, and without implanting properly. So that's one of the common issues that occurs. Okay, during weeks 3 to 8 in the embryonic period, differences or problems in development can result in major defects in systems. It can result in psychological deficits, or it can result in minor physical defects in the structure of the human, or the structure of the embryo at this point. So the embryonic period is considered a critical period because that's when major defects can arise in the structures that are beginning to form. When something is in the process of beginning to form, that is when it is most susceptible to damage. And you can see here all of these different systems of the body forming that are shown in the green and purple charts. During the times shown in green, this is when major defects are most likely. And so you can see throughout, these green bars are throughout the embryonic period. When things are starting to form, they are susceptible to problems. So I don't, if there's problems with the eyes, perhaps this baby's going to end up being born blind. If there's problems with the ears, maybe being born deaf. There might be some kind of limb malformations. There might be a hole in the heart if it's while the heart's developing. There are issues. So weeks 3 to 8, critical period. This is where most major kinds of defects occur. Problems can still occur in the fetal period, but they tend to be more minor physical defects, or they might be more psychological defects. And so you don't see as many major defects. Once you reach those purple bars, those systems are formed well enough to kind of protect themselves from major problems, although they can still occur. Well, let's see what causes these problems. I'm talking about damage occurring to these systems. What is it that's going to cause this damage? Well, these are known as teratogens, environmental substances that can cause harm during prenatal development. Substances or environmental factors is another word you could put in there as well. It comes from the Greek word terra, meaning monster. And some examples are things like, the mother smoking, doing drugs, drinking alcohol, the mother getting some kind of disease like chickenpox, for instance. is a nasty one. Being exposed to X-rays during the embryonic period, and actually there's many more as well. Excessive heating of the body, for instance, being in a hot tub for a long period of time could cause a fever to develop within the embryo, causing major damage. We're going to look a little bit more closely at some of these teratogenic. We're not going to look at all of them, but we will look at a number of them. And we'll start with drugs and alcohol. So, as it says here, the use of recreational drugs such as opiates, cocaine, or marijuana during pregnancy can affect the mother and the developing human. It mentions recreational drugs, but make no mistake, there are also plenty of subscription medications that can cause harm as well. It's critical if a person is trying to get pregnant, that they're aware of uh, whether or not their prescription medications can cause prenatal damage. Some of them are perfectly safe, others are known to be very dangerous. And this is one of the first things that you would talk to a doctor about in an initial prenatal visit, or if you know that you're going to be trying to get pregnant, it's good to talk over with your doctor about prescription medication you're on. As far as alcohol, as it says here, a woman who drinks alcohol is gambling with their baby's development. It can cause a variety of defects. And it used to be that we had a much more relaxed attitude. And when I say we, I mean like doctors and developmental psychologists. And, you know, the standard line used to be that doctors would say, well, it's okay to have the occasional drink, to have a glass of wine with dinner or something like that. But you would just had to really limit your amount of alcohol and try to make it a minimal amount. The message has really changed. We know that any amount of alcohol can cause problems. The more alcohol that ends up in the system, the greater the risk. But even small amounts are not considered safe anymore. The what doctors and developmental psychologists will tell you now is no alcohol. That if you're pregnant, you should not be drinking alcohol during the pregnancy at all. Um, this, and if you're planning on a pregnancy, I mean, a potential father's excessive alcohol use can also damage their sperm, and it can make fetal alcohol syndrome more likely to occur. So the father can have an influence as well if he's drinking heavily before conception occurs, and it can because of the effect on his sperm. There's a spectrum of alcohol related problems. The most severe one is known as fetal alcohol syndrome, or FAS. It's characterized by learning disabilities, physical growth retardation, facial malformations, and behavioral disorders. So it can be very severe problems that occur with fetal alcohol syndrome. Let's take a look at an example. These are brains from 2 6-week-old babies. So just 6 weeks after birth. The one on the left is considered a normal from a normal 6-week-old. The one on the right is the brain of a 6-week-old infant with fetal alcohol syndrome, and you can see the seriously deformity of the brain that was caused by fetal alcohol syndrome. So I mean, it's not minor issues; it's major deformation of the brain that can occur. And finally, to finish up here, one more teratogen I'm going to mention is Zika virus. It's a somewhat new teratogen. You can get it through mosquito bites or through sexual activity if the other person's a carrier. It is particularly harmful during the first trimester, which makes sense. Remember, the embryonic period is from week 3 to week 8, so that's during the first trimester, which trimester is referred to, the first 3 months, the second 3 months, the third 3 months. It's a little bit different way of organizing the pregnancy. So if it is early in the pregnancy, this is when the Zika virus can have its most damage. It's been linked to birth defects such as brain abnormalities and microcephaly, which means being born with an abnormally small head circumference. And you can see a picture of an infant here with microencephaly. And that will conclude learning objective 1.